everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 9 of TRIGUN Stampede. So, working our way to the finale. Working our way to the final episodes of this season. Last week was the rule of 8. We started to get the flashback with Vash. Got to see him be raised by Brad. And, Luinda? Getting raised by them on the ship. And then him deciding that he needs to go find knives because things need to be settled. So, yeah. Vash is on his way. He's found Knives and some other individuals, and we don't exactly know what Knives is doing with all of the red plants. He's not healing them like Vash has been. So what is he doing with them? Well, hopefully we're going to find that out. But it's crazy to think we just have this episode, which I'm assuming is going to possibly finish up the flashback, because then we have 10, 11, and 12 to round out the season. But we're getting a season 2 supposedly of this, so I'm assuming they're not probably going to. I imagine they're probably maybe going to either, but there's a lot left unsaid, right? Because we have 3 episodes after this one to presumably, I don't think they're going to get back to Knives. If they get back to Knives, I think it's going to be like for a brief moment, and then Knives is going to retreat or run away, and they're going to have to deal with Blue Summers as well as Zazie. So, I don't know. And then we have the whole thing with Livio and Wolfwood. It seems like a lot to try to cram in 3 episodes after this. So, I think that they're probably going to get a game plan of how they're going to go. And then they're going to face their first hurdle after that game plan. And then season 2 is going to be the continuation of that. Or so I hope. Because I really like TRIGUN Stampede. I wasn't sure how I would feel about it at this point because I'm so used to OG series. But they've done some really cool things. It's a lot different than the OG series in a lot of ways, and that's not a bad thing. So I'm really excited about it. But I have been catching up with other stuff, and I'm finally here, and I'm like, no, I want to watch episode 9 and see what the flashback looks like and how we possibly finish it. And maybe it'll be a 3-parter. Who knows? But I think now that he's come into contact with Knives, we're going to see what happened there. Maybe we'll see how he lost his arm, and then we're going to find the aftermath of that out and see what ends up happening. And I don't know if we're going to tie back to the present in this episode, but we might next episode. So there's a lot of what ifs, and it kind of depends on the pacing of this episode and what we end up doing with it. But I'm excited. It's going to be a fun time. So I want to give a quick shout out over to our Patreon, to our philanthropy tier for this week, to give them a big shout out and thanks for all that they do, especially because this is the last episode before the new year. We're going to start 2024 with TRIGUN Stampede, which is exciting. Sadly, the manga was supposed to show up this month, but it's not going to. It's been held back till April for some reason. I don't know why, but it has been. So I am going to look at the TRIGUN manga, but it maybe by that point in April we'll know about season 2. So that would be fun to tie it all in, but we'll see. So I want to give a shout out over to Alex Cornejo, to Anime Annie, to Anna, to Be Happy, to Dana, to Destiny Marie, to Edgar, to Eric, to Kiri, to Nameless Monster, to Matthew Palfinier, to Shimoyama, to Sunspots, as well as Trails, Translucent Men, Tyrone, Lyndon, Jimmy Lujan, Aku Q, Loishiji, and Danger Zone! So, thank you guys so much for supporting me, especially this holiday season. I greatly appreciate it. All of my love. So, I have a couple comments I do want to address before we start this whole thing. I almost forgot about them. They're not really related to any spoilers, but Limited Sue talked about laugh, love, and Livio instead of live, laugh, love. I love that. Laugh, love, and Livio. But also noted in episode 6, Night Tao, who was in the little brochure, in the wanted poster, I was like, who is that? They are the author of the TRIGUN manga. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So we get like a nice little reference to them. It's a nice little callback. I'm like, I like that. I dig it. I Swallow Appleseeds 927 noted that Livio's fight in episode 6 was animated by the same person as Ruby in volume 1. And the whole it's a combat skirt scene. I was like, oh, I like Ruby a lot. And so I was like, oh, that's so cool. And now that I go back and rewatch that scene and replay it, I'm like, yeah, the fight style and everything kind of seems like Ruby. Dig it. I love it. It's great. So thank you, I Swallow Apple Seeds, for that little tidbit. And then finally, K.A. pointed out, we talked about Blue Summer's voice actor, how they play Shigaraki, how there's Tsukishima, but there's also some roles I forgot they played that they noted. They're also, they were a child voice actor, which explains why they're, so kind of versed in the profession, but they play Clavis in Death Parade. Forgot about that. Yurio in Yuri on Ice. Benedict Blue from Violet Evergarden, which is funny, they're Blue Summers and they've played Benedict Blue. I'm like, you might be typecast. But they also play Rei from Buddy Daddies, as well as Inumaki in Jujutsu Kaisen, and they are the Japanese dub voice for Zhu Zhang from Modao Zushi. So that's really, really cool. I like learning all those little tidbits. Fun times. But all right, thank you guys so much for the comments. I really appreciate it. I'm so beyond excited to dive into this episode. I've been waiting all day. I had to go into town. I got home and I was like, oh, I want to watch this episode and see what else with this flashback we get and how this confrontation with Knives and Vash goes. Don't think it's gonna go well, but we'll just have to see, won't we? So we're gonna start episode 9 of Trigun Stampede, and we're gonna do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Huh, okay. Okay. Oh, well, this is an interesting turn. Meryl and Roberto getting kidnapped, who'd have thunked? At least it's Meryl and Roberto. It's not just Meryl, because if Meryl was reduced to being the damsel in distress and Roberto was left behind, I'd be a little bit annoyed. But the fact that Roberto is there too, I'm like, okay, although Roberto, what we doing, sir? You just don't fire at Zazie. Ah! So I wanted to bring out Whiteboard Coon because there are several things I want to talk about, both in the spoiler discussion as well as the regular part. But can we talk about this damn piano scene? It's such a little scene. It's such a little thing, but there's just something about, I don't know, there's something about piano scenes between characters that always gets me. I don't know why, but it's just like the musicality of it. It's the idea that there's one person on the piano playing and then the other person joins in. It's like this silent way that they express their connection with one another. It's intimate, it's personal, but it's so nonverbal that you just, like, the music spells out everything for you. It's such a show not tell moment. It is everything. And the fact that we see Vash sit down with Knives and play, and then we see Knives alone playing, it just adds so much, right? So I thought originally when we see Knives like sitting down at this beautiful golden piano playing by himself, I thought that it was like going to be the past, but no, it's of him right now. I honestly love the keys are black and the little space in betweens are white, so it's an inverse of like a typical piano. That's actually beautiful. I love that. But we have the idea of Knives, Million Knives, or Nye, as Vash calls him, and the idea that he's playing alone. He's playing alone, but he seems unhappy. He wants Vash with him. And it's just that part, it guts you, right? Because it shows him, for the record, Knives looks very good as a character. I love the pushed back hair. Vash is pushed forward, Knives is pushed back. I also think that's like a subtle symbolic way of saying that Vash is always moving forward. He's progressive and Knives is stuck in the past. However you want to determine that. But yeah, it shows him playing the piano and he's just seeming like he thinks back as a kid where he was happy playing the piano and he was sitting there playing it and he seemed happy. And then you have Vash joining him and Vash comes up and he's like, hey, oh, bro. And Vash just like pushes him over and like slides in and bumps him across, and Knives looks kind of like annoyed at that. Like, you know, like a sibling would. He's like, I don't, and then, but then, you know, he looks grumpy at first, but then Knives, you know, sees Vash, you know, enjoying himself and joining him in the duet. And he looks over at Vash like, what's up? And Vash is so happy. And he's like, hey, we're brothers. We're having a great time playing the piano. And they seem like they're happy together. And then we cut to Knives. And what I love is him playing. and he reaches over to do the part that's Vash's part. You know, he does that by himself, but he's all by himself, so he's like, he's not complete, right? He needs his brother, right? Ah! I love it so much! Yes, I love it so much. It's such a good, it's just a nice show don't tell way of saying that Knives wants to be with his brother. That at the end of the day, Knives wants his brother with him. And he keeps blaming all of these outside forces for trying to take his brother away. And the truth of it is that you can't control your brother. Vash needs to be able to do whatever he wants to do. And it's just establishing that at the end of the day, Knives has this slight insecurity and this kind of codependence for Vash, that he wants his brother there, and Vash is kind of like, I can do everything on my own, but I like you, brother, but I don't need you to survive, whereas Knives seems like he really wants Vash to be there. So then we have the doctor. It's the doctor, only he has hair, he doesn't have the head plate, but looking at him, I'm like, yeah, the young version, he's the doctor that ends up working with Knives in the end. So the doctor is there. The doctor's been there all along. He was there from 150 years prior. Oh my God. And the plate in his head would establish how he's been able to stay alive this whole time. And I'm assuming that since they talked about the cryogenic freeze, keeping their aging like slower than normal, I'm wondering if maybe Knives has access to his own, and that's what the doctor's been using. Fascinating. But he's like, I got what you wanted. And he's like, what are you trying to do? And Knives is like, I want to take all the plants and leave. So then there's this, he's like, what is that? He's like, there's a big sound of an alarm. And Knives is very angry by that. Knives has an anger problem. Can we establish that? Knives has an emotion problem. He gets very emotional very easily. So he is a very emotional person, but he's very quick to anger, right? Whereas you have Vash, who is very emotional too, but he's very empathetic, right? So we put Vash up here. And we have Vash, who is also very emotional, but he is more empathetic. I like that, you know, they both kind of represent two different sides of a person's personality, and just, so yeah, interestingly enough, we'll get out here. We go past the OP, right? Get past this OP. I'm amazed that we didn't just, I thought that maybe until the alarm sounded, I thought maybe we were in like the past of the past with Knives and the organ. But then when we get to him going down to the dock with the angel, or the angels with the plants, then it reveals that it's been the same place all along. What's interesting here is I'm assuming there's not that many people aboard this ship than there was the ship that Vash was at with Brad and Luinda, or Luida. I keep forgetting her name, Luida, because this ship looks very dirty. Like, it's not well maintained at all, right? So what's fascinating here is on Knives' ship, the ship that Knives is on, it's like things are not maintained. They're not maintained, and not only that, but it's pretty much just use until gone, and then just restart. It has a very like junk mentality of, we're just gonna like beat the snot out of this and use it until we run it into the ground, and then we'll just get something new and do the exact same thing over again. Whereas the ship that Vash was on was trying to be sustainable. It was trying to be sustainable and well maintained. And there's a lot of reasons why they could be different. It looked like the ship that Vash was on with Brad and Luida was very well staffed. There was a lot of people there. There was a lot of researchers there. There were a lot of people that were kind of dedicated to maintaining the order of stuff. Whereas on this ship, it seems like there's not a lot of people left. It's kind of bare bones. The one doctor was like the only one, and he doesn't really know how to solve the problem with the plants. So things just kind of like domino effect and piled up and got worse and worse. And Knives doesn't know how to solve the problem. So it's just like this mounding frustration that builds up. But I like them showing us the differences of what Knives and Vash were dealing with once they landed, because that makes a difference too, right? Knives was stuck with these humans on the ship that have this kind of junket mentality, whereas Vash was fortunate enough to meet Luita, who has the same kind of morals as Rim, and Brad, who was persuaded by Luita and kind of changed his tune. And so it's so funny how the environments and how Knives and Vash interact with them kind of either, they both contribute to the mentalities of Knives and Vash and how they view humanity. So that was really cool to see, like, to see it from two different ends. I really, really liked that. And so, yeah. And then I don't know why Knives has the hood over his head, but Knives is, like, horrified that all these plants are dying. Like, he's like, what is this? And they're like, we've hit the production limit. So they put too great a load on the plants. So basically, we have the idea that on Knives' ship, the plants were at their limit and they did the last run before they died. And there was, the doctor's like, this is what happens when it was too much to power the ship with the plants that they had, which, what the hell were they doing? Were they just running their electricity all day? Like, the other ship seemed like it was doing a lot better with the plants that they had. These have so many and they're just not doing it. But I do love seeing it's ironic. Would it be ironic to say the humanity of Knives, since Knives denies his humanity? Would it be ironic to say that? I love seeing the compassion on Knives' face. When he sees all the plants dying, he looks genuinely concerned and sad and is like, what are we doing? Can't we do anything? Like, to see Knives' character kind of open up and to see that he, like Vash, cares. It's just, he doesn't care for humanity. He cares about his brethren. He cares about their well-being, but then he blames it on the humans, whereas Vash does not blame it on the humans. So that it's so neat to see, though, Knives have this reaction. And Vash isn't there to see it, which is frustrating. It cut them off from the higher dimension, which is interesting. They can't maintain their bodies. So let's talk about these plants. Let's talk about the plants. So we know the plants are an energy source. They create energy in big bursts. The doctor and them say that they can't maintain their bodies. They can't maintain their bodies, and they're cut off from this so-called higher dimension. And so because of that, they kind of like, they use energy too fast and die out quick. Which most, as we come to find out, are clones. They're not the original. They're mostly just clones from other plants. I'm so fascinated by that little girl. I say she's a little girl. She's actually a grown-ass woman because she talks like a grown-ass woman. But the female plant that has the humanoid body, I'm so fascinated by her. I want to know about her. But I don't know if we're going to find out this season all the mysteries with her. I want to know things. Maybe that might be the twist, that she's like Knives' daughter or something, or it sounds like he rescued her, because these plants don't reproduce like humans do. But it sounds like he rescued her, broke her out of the thing, and helped her to maintain a humanoid body, but she's one of the plants. And maybe he's just like, well, Vash, if you won't come with me and be your brother, I have a new little sister, and she'll stay with me. And she's just like, I hate him. She's a rightful trollop. We've only seen her talk like twice, but she's terrifying. But yeah. And he's like, they're already in the terminal stage. And they're all like withered and they look really sad. The thing that's so fascinating is that Knives can't help them. Knives doesn't help them. When he touches it, it's not like when Vash does it, he can't transfer and cleanse the plants, which is fascinating. And all the plants we've seen with Knives thus far have all been red. Like, he can't seem to cure them from what they could do. So that's interesting. It seems that Knives, he doesn't have the power to heal. Okay. What's ironic is that Vash can heal the plants. So we have that set up, right? I like the idea that Vash is capable of giving life And then we have this metaphorical thing of Knives taking life because he has the knives all over his body that he destroys and Vash creates. So I like what the twins represent. They're like the scales there having the balance, right? Interesting. So yeah, what's also interesting is that Vash looks completely human so far. He looks completely humanoid. Knives, there's like the parts of his hand and the parts of his face that aren't like the direct face and the direct fingers. They're like this chalk white. Like, is he like trying to turn back into a plant? Is he like not fully embracing his human body? So he's in this like weird state between humanoid and plant body. It's very interesting, right? And so they ask what he's doing here. And they're like, why do you continue to overload them beyond the threshold as if they're disposable? And they're like, well, we have to speed up the reconstruction. It's the only way we can hope to prosper on this planet. So they're basically putting the plants all into overdrive to try to hurry up reconstruction and powering all the equipment so that they can thrive on the planet. But in the process, it's killing the plants. And they're like, their last run will start soon. And he's like, the last run. And then the doctor's like, come on, let's go. Let's not find out. And he's like, why don't you heal them? And the doctor's like, well, he's like, it's too late. I can't heal them. And that's the thing. The doctor doesn't say whether he can heal them or not. But he says at this point in the stage, they're too far gone to heal. And then it shows them like dying off. When you force a plant that's reached its production limit to go out of control, then it uses up all its remaining energy and they harvest it one last time. And then it powers the city up and we see like the city and that's it. And I don't blame Knives for getting upset because yeah, he's watching his brethren just die in these jars. Like I would be terrified too. Right? And that would be so gut-wrenching to watch your people like be used by this other species and to the point where they just consume all their energy and they're just left as these little husks. That's terrifying. Yeah. And of course the humans are probably thinking, well, we'll just harvest some more. We'll just make new plants and then go from there and start the process all over again. Oh, it's awful. And the doctor says to forgive him, but Knives... forgive us humans. Knives is not about to do that. And then Vash shows up. Of course he shows up. And I like that Knives has to like reveal himself then. And his hair looks like a porcupine. It's all the different little like points and everything. And he's like, I knew you were alive. You must have heard them, Vash. And he's like, there's screams. And Vash is like, oh, on my ship, we've been doing great. This is bad. And so, again, you talk about molding perceptions. These people on this ship, they're just like, oh, well, the plants serve us, and we can do whatever we want them. They're disposable. And on Vash's ship, there's a little bit more care. But it is a weird thing, right? Because you kind of feel like, ooh, we're our humanity, we're using these. It's not like a light bulb, you know? It's not like a light bulb or electricity that doesn't have a soul. You know, you can use electricity and you don't feel bad because there's no living, breathing thing you're killing by using it, right? And you're like, ah. Of course, I say that, and then we destroy ecosystems for our own selfish purposes. So, you know, what can we do? But I do, you know, I feel like I can't really blame Knives for getting mad because, yeah, these humans suck. They're using their people as batteries, and I would be upset too. Vash, of course, has the very optimistic, you know, idealistic thing where he believes that he's going to save the plants, the humans, and Nye, as he says. He's like, I can save all three. And I'm like, ugh. And Wolfwood and Roberto are not so convinced of that. Wolfwood and Roberto are like, no, that's not possible. You're going to have to pick and choose. Are you going to save the humans? Are you going to save the plants? Are you going to save your brother? You can't save them all. And I feel like that's going to lead to the issue of this season of Vash maybe having to come to terms with that. Because I don't think we're going to solve the entire story in 3 episodes. No, it's just like, where are we going to leave off at for season 2? And I think Vash is going to be put at a crossroads, like we start at the end of this episode, to be like, okay, well, what's your choice? Are you going to save everybody? Are you going to save no one? Are you going to sacrifice yourself? So, yeah, it's just not a good scenario. And they try to get Vash to leave. And Knives, he's like, didn't you hear them? Did you hear them dying? And Vash is like, And Knives, of course, is like, well, fine. There's no need for words. And Knives has, like, he grows, like, all the weaponry off of his hand. Again, I like the idea that he has this white surrounding him. And then he just slashes everybody. Like, it's pretty violent. And Vash is like, please stop this. Please stop killing all these people. And he's like, nobody's called me Nye in a long time. He's like, I go by millions of knives. He's like, I represent my myriad of brethren spread across this planet. So Knives' whole mission is to collect the plants. And July, they call it July on the map, and then they say July in the episode. But it is a plant carrier is there. And just so happens that Meryl and Roberto have been taken right to it. We've cut across all the things. We've just cut across right to it. But it's a plant carrier, and he wants to create his own, like, colony of just the plants. And being like, well, we plants will outlive the humans, because the humans, they can't survive without us. But as Vash points out in this episode, the plants can't survive without the humans. So it's basically, there has to be a coexistence there, right? There has to be a coexistence on the planet, or both of them are going to die, right? If there's a coexistence. Now, Luida kind of explains a way that this could work is if the plants, which 150 years, if the plants help to create this environment like is on the movable ship, then it would lessen the load on the plants, and it could possibly be a way that they could coexist. Of course, Roberto has the very realistic but cynical outlook of, well, that could take centuries. And she's like, yes, bitch, we've been doing this for 150 years. What do you think we've been doing? So she's like, I know. But I like Luida saying, but it's worth doing. Like, our other option is to just treat it like the Wild West and just keep killing each other. And that seems like a dumb idea. So I like that she's like, yeah, it's a lot of work, but in the end, for future generations, it's going to pay off. Like, quit being a selfish bastard and think about the people after you, you know? And so I like that there is a possible solution. The problem is that Knives is not even considering that. He's like, no. And Vash, you know, Vash wants to save everybody, but there has to be some give and take, right? There has to be some give and take. Do I think that this series is going to end with them all holding hands in sunshine and rainbows? No, but it could be a work in progress. We just don't know yet. Just don't know yet. And I don't know what my dog's toy, where is it at? He's wanting me to throw it, but I don't see it. And he's like, I'm now millions knives. Mm-hmm. And Vash is like, what are we doing? And so, yeah, Knives blames a lot of this on Rim, saying every other ship other than the plant carriers would have been rubble if she hadn't meddled. So, essentially, Knives had planned to kill all the humans except for the plant carriers. And Vash is like, well, that sucks. What? And then all these other humans show up, and Knives gets them. And then Vash says, well, plants can't survive without humans to take care of them. Plants use up all their energy in one burst and die outside of human control. Now, when he said that, I was like, ooh, that does sound like something that a human would tell a plant so that they, you know, listen to what they say. There might be some truth to that. It could be sort of like, at this point, humanity and the plants have both been taken from their natural environment, so neither can coexist without the other. But it is, I do kind of side with Knives a little bit, where he's like, really, you bought that? That sounds like something a human would tell you so that you do what they say. It does, but I'm sure there is some truth to it. But again, Knives is having none of it. He's like, no, we'll outlive the humans. And Vash is like, I don't think that's going to work. And he's like, chains are still chains. And he's like, this is power, like the ability to do whatever he wants to. And I do agree that it does suck, the idea of the plants being controlled by people. Like, that does suck. And being stuck in little pods. I agree with that. The line he gives when he gives Vash the gun, and he talks about humans being able to use this, like, secret ability to, like, kill someone from far away with just the push of a trigger. Like, explaining the gun in, like, an alien way is so good. And then he's like, here, you like humans so much, so here, you can use this just like a human would. An evil weapon of the sinners, taking lives easily from afar with the twitch of a finger. I like that the humans are called sinners. I like that. Fitting for a human lover, for an arm, a fitting arm for a human lover like you. The plants are the ones who need power, and I have what we need. Now all you and I need to do is proceed. So yeah, so basically he's like, plants just need the power and we're fine, but humans need the plants for power. So interesting. I like that there's this little kind of this thing that the power, if given to the plants, that's all they need, but the humans need the plants for the power. And so he's like, look, Vash, I gave you a gun. Now you can come with me and we'll just go make our own paradise, and us and the plants will be fine, and you just leave all these humans behind. And that's when Louita shows up. And she's like, let's go. And see, Knives doesn't ask who's she, what you've been up to, what you've been doing all this time. Doesn't even think about it. He just says, go ahead and kill her and let's go. I'm like, you should have known Vash wasn't going to kill her. You should have known that. And then he gets mad when Vash says no. And he's like, I'm not going to do that. And then he's like, oh, well, you can't do anything without me, can you? And when Vash tells him to stop and to not do it, he's like, all I did was let Rim protect me all this time until the bitter end. And because of that, I lost her. And Knives is just like, why are you focused on her? Why aren't you thinking about me? I'm your brother. She's just a human. And he's like, I won't let you take anyone else away from me. And that look that Knives gives him, that look on Knives' face, it is not necessarily a look of betrayal, but it's a look like, why do you need anybody but me? Like, for Knives is like, I just need you. Like, we're brothers, we're family, we're blood. Like, or whatever plants have. He's like, we're the ones that are related and should depend on each other. He's like, why do you need these other people? What have they done for you? And for Vash to say, quit taking people away from me, it's almost like Knives would say, he's like, well, quit going away from me. Why won't you be with me? Why do you need these other people? It's like just such a look. And I love the vulnerability that Knives gets in this episode. It's so damn good. You're just like, you kind of get where he's coming from. And then he gets mad, but Knives doesn't do like Vash. Knives doesn't want to talk it out. He doesn't want to consider. He just gets angry, and then he puts that anger off on other people. He goes after Louita, and I thought he was going to kill her. He says, you witch. He says, how many times? How many times will you steal him from me? And at that point, at first, I was like, is he thinking she was Rim? But no, that's not it. He's just talking about humanity. He's like, how many times will humans steal my brother from me? He's like, why does he love you all so much? He should just love me. Like, why does he side with you all and not his own flesh and blood? And I thought he was going to kill Louita. I thought he was going to kill her. And then he says to stop. And that's when this freaking black hole, like, shows up on his arm. Like, what? So, Vash has this gateway. He has the gate. And Knives makes a comment saying his gate hasn't opened up yet. Again, presumably. But it's just this giant black hole that sucks everything up, which is absolutely terrifying, right? That it's just literally this black hole. Like, how does this work, right? And it starts to absorb everything. And the doctor doesn't know what that is. And Knives is like, what does he say there? I want to go back to that scene. And because Vash is like, what is this? Like, it doesn't suck Vash up. It just starts sucking up everything around him. Okay, so we are pretty close to July on the map, but clearly, like, they skipped over there by the end of the episode. Because Vash is like, I don't understand what this is. And Knives is like, you fool. Is that a gate? Okay, so the doctor knows what it is. and everything starts to get sucked in. Like people get sucked into it. Like, get sucked into his arm. What the fudge? No, and Knives cuts it off. So he cuts off the arm before it can, like, suck anything else up, and then it just sucks itself up and disappears. Huh. Okay. Cool. And Knives says, don't touch him. Don't touch Vash. Oh. But Vash points the gun at Knives because he thinks he's going to hurt Louita. And that moment, that's so heartbreaking because Knives saved, you know, all of them from being sucked up in the black hole. He technically protected his brother, and his brother points the gun at him. Like, how betrayed you would feel if your own brother, after all that, pointed the gun at you. And just the look on Knives' face, like, it's all, like, he just laughs, because it's like, would you laugh or would you cry? You have those two options. And so he decides to, like, make it a stalemate. He's like, just for a short while, a century or so, which is, roll credits, cut to now, I'll promise to build a world of plants. Mm-hmm. And the doctor leaves with him. Damn. Oh. So, this whole time, Vash has had the knowledge that his brother is gathering plants. But he's had the doctor to help him, and he's had all these other people to help him along the way, and Vash has been by himself. So, it explains why Knives has been so successful. He's been building this army of followers to his cause, and who knows how many of these individuals are, who knows if Blue Summers is like the girl and is an angel too, or a plant too. I call them angels because Rim in the OG called them angels. That they're still plants, but that's just what she called them because they seemed ethereal. But we don't know if Blue Summers is a plant. We know now that Zazie is made up of worms. That's fun. Let's talk about that in a minute. Which could be an experiment too from the doctor, but the doctor, maybe not. We're going to go back to that. But we don't know if Blue Summers is a plant. We don't know how many others are just experimented humans or how this works. Blue Summers might be just a human that was experimented on, for all we know. They may not be a plant. It could just be the blonde girl is the only other plant outside of Vash and Knives that has a conscious humanoid body, right? But then we go back to the present and we find out that Brad and them constructed the arm for Vash. That he got the fake arm from them on the ship. This flying ship in the sky. Brad aged pretty damn good. I'm just going to say, like, Louita looks pretty old, but Brad aged really good. He just has, like, some wrinkles and some flecks of hair. I'm like, dude, you aging pretty nice. You know, you don't have to say that about Vash, right? He said, I don't have anything to say for myself. He's like, show me your arm. I like it. Forever young. I'm jealous. I just like it. And then of course, everybody shows up. I love how happy Meryl is to see them all. And then, of course, Wolfwood's like, friends? Who said we were friends? It's great. And he's like, oh, thanks, guys. So they're on this ship. But damn it, of course, the worms and Zazie have to show up in the middle of the sandstorm. So I like the establishment that a lot of the passengers are still asleep and that people just wake up periodically, and that helps make time go faster as they're, like, working on stuff. That's good to know. And so then they show them the little paradise that they're creating. Now, I love the idea of the blue flowers. I thought they were maybe forget-me-nots, but I love the idea that they're literally plants. I love that Meryl has no clue what they are. Like, the people that were born on the planet that did not, you know, originally come from Earth, they would not know what any of this is. And I like that Meryl's kind of, like, amazed by it. And then, of course, you know, Roberto, as far as we know, he was born on this planet too. He wasn't from, you know, the frozen cryogenic tubes or whatever. And she's like, well, the flora can lessen the load on the plants. So that would help out a lot. And Roberto, I don't know. I feel like Roberto being gruff and being cynical in this episode, it feels a little out of character. I don't know, because I'm like, he's a reporter and he's, you know, been around the block or whatever. I don't know. It feels like Roberto being so cynical and nihilistic about it. and then getting super, super defensive against Zazie as soon as he like shoots at him as soon as they as soon as they wake up. Did it feel a little out of character to anybody else? It just felt weird. And I don't know if just Roberto projecting his fear and insecurity in that moment, but it's just like, I don't know. It felt like not heavy-handed, but it felt a little out of character for him. And then Meryl, you know, she's like sucked into Luita's story. She's like all aboard. Meryl's all aboard the Vash train, the idealistic train. And Roberto seems to try to be like, well, that's not going to work. Almost like he's trying to protect Meryl in that moment to keep her from getting too idealistic and maybe falling prey to potential dangers. But I don't know. I like that Luita, you know, I'm like, you didn't have to go on her ship. You know, she like invites you to her ship and everything. And she like shows you all this stuff and you get all mad and bitchy about it. And then she's like, well, no matter how long it takes, I want to follow the right path. And he like just completely shuts her down because of it. I'm like, dude, what a negative Nancy. What a party pooper. Like, she's been at this for 150 years. How long you been on this planet? Shut the frick up. She's like, I don't want to justify wrongdoing just to survive. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, she's been doing pretty darn good. And then, of course, Roberto's like, well, you sound like Vash. And she's like, yeah, we kind of, you know, all have a similar moral core. And he's like, well, there's no place for niceties on this planet. And I'm like, well, get out, Roberto, since you're not welcome here. And then he gets so defensive and like uppity about it. He's like, well, you're free to go your own way and I'll just go mine. And I'm like, well, then get out of her nice, pretty green place. She doesn't want you smoking here, asshole. Like, he sounds very childish in this scene, which is funny because he's like calling her a child for thinking such idealistic things, but she's being like rational and logical and he's acting like a kid. I'm like, get off my lawn. Like, what is your problem, dude? And then she's like, no smoking on the ship. Get out of here. And so, of course, he leaves. And my thing was, too, he was sitting there being like, Meryl, go find somewhere where I can smoke. And I'm like, she's not your kid. She's not your maid. She's not your servant. Go find it yourself. Roberto makes me frustrated. He's my least favorite character on this show. I'm like, get out of here. And then at least he called her by her first name and she tries to make a big deal about it, but then he goes back to being the way that he was. Meanwhile, Wolfwood's all like, what are you going to do by knives? Are you going to try to make up with him? Or are you going to get rid of him? And Vash is like, I said I wasn't going to kill anybody else. So no, I'm not going to kill anyone again. The humans, the plants, or Nye. And Wolfwood's so easy to discard him very easily with that notion, being like, the day will come when you have to pick between them. And I'm like, that may happen by the season finale. There may come a moment where he has to, and we'll see how that goes. But I do like that Brad kind of defends him. I like that Brad's like, you sound like me when I was a kid, you know, trying to like be all bitter around him. But he's like, you'll come around. And I like Wolfwood's like, shut up, old man. He's like, Vash is tough. You'll learn that if you hang around yourself. I like that Brad and Luita defend him and defend his ideals. I'm glad they do. I'm glad they're there to do that. Of course, then Zazzie shows up. I'm glad Luita's okay. I keep worrying she's going to die in this dang thing. And then Zazzie took Meryl and Roberto to July to the ship as bait. Yep. The third of the 7 big cities. And then Zazzie's like, yeah, you haven't seen me in this out before. And they're like, did Knives send you? And it's like, let's talk about something more interesting than that. This planet you call No Man's Land stands at a crossroads. And I like that, of course, they're in the center of the crossroads. He's like, so I want to find out, who do we worms side with, you humans or the plants? So I like the idea that Zazzie is like this evolved worm, or is like made up of worms. Do we side with you, humans, or the plants? I like that Zazzie's like a third party. That kind of is interesting. I like that. They have like the creepy face at the end, but they're like, who do we side with? And of course, I'm like, Roberto, why did Roberto instantly shoot at Zazzie? Why? Was it to test out to see if they were made up of worms or physically there? I'm like, Roberto's usually aired. Roberto feels so out of character this episode. I don't know how else to describe it. They feel kind of childish in how they're just like grumble, grumble, grumble. And then when they instantly fire at Zazzy, I'm like, that, you know, Roberto in the past would have treaded, I think, a little more cautiously, especially since Zazzy hasn't made a move. But they just feel out of character this episode, and I can't understand why. I'm like, what the fudge? And then they're like, no, this body's just a conduit. Okay, so I guess it's just put together by the worms, and they're like, who are you to make such a grand judgment? And I like Zazzy's outfit. They're like, well, this is our planet. We were here long before you came. And I do like Zazzy's argument there. Zazzy's like, well, who are we going to side with? The plants or the humans? Because we were here first. And you guys are threatening us both. I feel like Zazzy's getting to the point of saying both species are a potential threat. So should we side with either of you? Should we help either of you? Should we try to destroy you all? What should we do? Like, I kind of like Zazzy's, you know, commentary here. And they're like, you're repeat offenders. You first destroyed your own planet, and now you've come here. And of course, Meryl's like, well, that can't be. And Zazzy's like, yeah, it's true. Y'all wrecked shit on your own world, and then you came here. And it's like, well, you're not wrong. And then he says, now, when Zazzy says that the twins destroyed the ships, it's like, well, it was mainly knives. Vash was a, you know, unintentional co-conspirer. So then we have all of the plants, right? All of the plant bulbs. And they're like, knives brought them all over here. And then like, what are you doing? So the doctor came. So what's interesting is that Zazzy says, oh, they discovered us. So Zazzy's not really on either person's side. They're just kind of along for the ride. What's interesting is that Wolfwood and Blue Summers know Zazzy and has been working with Zazzy. So it's interesting that Zazzy could be manipulating this whole thing. But they say that they're a guest from Knives, so that's interesting. That's interesting. Zazzy is a curious character in all of this. I'm fascinated by what Zazzy's going to be doing, because this seems to be the first time the Doctor has met Zazzy. So it's not like Zazzy. I thought for a second that maybe Zazzy was an experiment of the Doctor's, that he like made the worm take humanoid shape or something. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So what's the deal? I'm so fascinated. He's like, why did you bring them here? And I like that Zazzy's like, I don't take orders from you. I was like, yeah, so why did Zazzy bring them here? I guess, is Zazzy trying to test Vash to see what Vash is going to do? Is Zazzy doing something that Knives told him to do? Is Knives acting outside the Doctor's purview? What's going on? I'm fascinated. Is Blue Summers acting outside the Doctor's purview? Knives accepted me as a guest. So... And then Meryl's like, what is going on? Give us some exposition. And Zazzy's like, well, you don't need to know. You have to, and, oh, the Doctor says you don't need to know. And Zazzy's like, well, I'll tell you, but you have to tell me in return. Who will benefit this planet more, the humans or the plants? Which do you think? Yeah, oh, I love it. I love the face with the bug. Who's going to help this planet more and benefit the worms, the plants or the humans? Indeed. So I like this. I like that we have this third party that's involved now too, because the worms are trying to figure out, they're like, well, we have to coexist here. So are we going to be able to coexist with you all? Or do we need to get rid of one of the two invaders? Because to Zazzy, what's fascinating is to Zazzy, the plants and humans are invaders. So Zazzy's like, well, the humans have a bad track record already, so I'm not really feeling them. But I don't think, maybe Zazzy's like, I don't get good vibes from Knives either in the plants, so are the plants going to take over and destroy all of us? Are you going to destroy all of us? Can we all coexist? How's this going to work? That's fascinating to me. So yeah, I love that. I love the idea that Zazzy's this third party that's kind of wanting to know about this as well. Neat! So, I really love this episode a lot. This episode's great, but I want to talk spoilers. So, we're going to talk spoilers. So, if you're not sticking around for those, I am super excited for episode 10. I can't believe we only have 3 episodes left of this season, but I'm really excited about it. So, in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with episode 10 of Trigun Stampede. Huh. Well, about that, There are some interesting things that are deviating from the OG series with this episode. Some things that I really like, and a couple things that I'm a little concerned about. So I don't know how long this spoiler talk will be, but we'll just kind of go back. Again, the work that we get more with Knives in this series, again, I've not read the manga, so I don't know a lot about the manga. But one thing I do appreciate that the anime does with Trigun Stampede is when you have a character like Knives, who is not only the antagonist, but is a relative of the protagonist, then you need to do either one of two things with him. You either need to do what the OG series did and make him a complete mystery, and you don't know anything about him till the very end, because that's kind of what the OG series did, and it works. I wish we'd had more with him, but it works. Or you do like what this series is doing and be like, okay, since we've revealed him from episode 1, now we're going to expand upon him, and we're going to give him depth, flesh him out as a character, and make us feel the conflict between him and Vash. And this series does that really well. I love Knives in this series. I love this episode and how we see Knives be vulnerable. We see his argument for wanting to save the plants. It makes total sense. It's like, no, that makes sense. You want to save your brethren? You want to populate? Because that was the one thing about the OG series, was that Knives was just like, I just want this planet to be me and you. But he never really talked about the other plants. He never really even seemed interested in the other plants. And again, I need to read the manga at some point. I'm sure there's some differences. But in the OG series, that was the one thing. It was kind of like the utopia that Knives was wanting to make didn't quite make sense, because it was just going to be him and Vash. And it's like, well, you guys, aren't you going to fight eventually and want other people around? This makes a lot more sense. Knives is like, I want to create a world for our brethren that we can live in, and screw these humans that wrecked everything and want to enslave us. No, that makes sense. You got me. I'm all in. I'm all on board with seeing how this plays out, because Vash sees like the good of humanity and Knives sees none. And the thing about it is, we've only seen the plants as being the victims, which makes us very empathetic towards them. But is there a catch? Is it like Rim said, that the plants will burn out of speed? Will the plants cause a bunch of dang black holes and kill themselves if they're in the wrong environment? We don't know. And Knives doesn't seem to know. What I like about it is Knives, he can't heal the plants on his own, it doesn't seem. And Knives doesn't have all the answers. He's just kind of going by what he does know, which can be dangerous. And so I really like how Knives is set up in here. I love the idea that he just wants to be with his brother, the piano thing. Oh, it's fantastic. I love the setup with the doctor. The choice of 150 years versus like 107 is interesting, but I'm okay with it. And I just think his mission in this series is interesting to me. And it also makes more sense that he has these followers of people like Legato, who's nihilistic about humanity being on this planet and hates his existence here. So Knives is like, well, if you hate your existence here, then help me and we'll wipe out humanity and you'll at least get something out of it before you die. And Legato's like, okay, right? I love the inclusion of Zazie as like a worm person, as Zazie not even being like a member of the Gung Ho game. Zazie's just like a representative of the worms that want to be this third party, knowing which side to go with. That's fascinating to me. I love that. I love the conflicting things with humanity and who's using the plants and using them to capacity and trying to save them. I like the idea that Vash can save the plants and Knives can't. All of these little things with the plants and Knives and Vash, I like a lot. But I think one of my favorite things about this episode is not only the idea of seeing Knives vulnerable and seeing him care about his people and seeing the struggle that he has with Vash, because Vash still wants to side with humanity and Knives is like, but what about your brother? What about me? Like that part. But the idea that Vash getting his arm cut off was not Knives trying to destroy him, but trying to save him. That part was so good, because in the OG series, Vash just chops off Knives' arm out of anger and spite at him to like punish him for siding with the humans. Like it's an act of violence against his brother, and then his brother fights back and it just makes Knives even madder. But here, this works so much better because Knives literally cut off his arm to save them all, and then Vash still pointed the gun at him because he thought he was going to hurt Luida. and Knives just has that feeling of betrayal, and it's handled so well. I love that twist. I love that. I love seeing Knives just not understand why Vash can side with these humans, and Vash doesn't understand why Knives is being so violent. It's just, it's really good, and I like the way that they handle it. It's great. I'm glad Louita and Brad don't die. In the OG series, they both die, and the moment we found out they were in the floating spaceship and the worms were like coming down, I was like, oh my god, they're gonna die, because that's what happens in the OG series. I'm glad they don't. I'm glad so far they're fine. Glad that's the case. I'm glad Zazzie just kidnaps Roberto and Meryl to progress the plot, to move the plot forward. That part was a little random. I still don't know why Zazzie felt the need to grab Meryl and Roberto, except that he knows Meryl and Roberto know Vash and Wolfwood, and that is incentive for them to go. But it's like, how is Vash and Wolfwood going to find them? I guess they're going to go to July, because was their obvious next step. But Zazzie's like, we got to get done in this season finale. Let's go. We got 3 episodes left. Let's get this plot moving. And I'm like, okay, Zazzie, you be here for this plot device. I thought Louita was going to die. I'm glad she doesn't. But I thought she was going to go. I have no clue what we're doing with this gate. No freaking idea. In the OG, the series, it's established because his arm kind of starts to expand, like the black hole expands his arm like it does in this, like it does in the OG series. In the OG series, Vash's body kind of like expands into a gun, kind of like Knives' body expands into Knives. And then Knives is able to like trigger Vash's body to manipulate itself like that, and he uses it to destroy parts of the city. Here, it seems like it's all triggered by Vash himself. Knives has no input on it, which I like. I like that it's something innately with Vash. Knives can't just trigger the black hole. It has to be something that comes from Vash. But as to how you control that, as to how is it going to be like a domain expansion in Jujutsu Kaisen? What are we going to do with that? I don't know. And I'm kind of fascinated about it. I'm really excited to see, is that something plants can do? How is it? I'm hoping that Knives and them explain gates more by the end of the series and what they function as and how they work. Like, I mean, I'm curious about the sci-fi elements. Like, that all sounds interesting. I want to know more about that. But yeah. And then I like the idea when we go back to the present of seeing, when Louita shows Meryl and them the little, like the paradise they've created. What I like about it is that it is offering a solution, saying like, hey, if we work together and the plants and the humans work together on this planet, we could find a way to coexist and it will work out. We just gotta go there, right? So yeah, I like a lot about this episode and what they're doing with the plot and how they're weaving in Knives and the sci-fi elements and the plants and all of that. I like that a lot. Like, that makes it different from the OG a lot, but in a really logical and good way. So, all for that. Keep that up, series. I'm digging that. It makes me excited to see where it goes to. So, I only have one major complaint. It should surprise no one that's tied to Roberto. Sunspot was like, you're not even going to let Roberto breathe without getting onto him. But hear me out. This is my problem with Roberto. Why do we need Wolfwood? Because this episode, I was so frustrated, and I was trying not to let it show in the reaction, but when Roberto was getting on to Meryl and saying like, well, this is all idealistic, and what about this? And that's Wolfwood's argument in the OG series. Wolfwood's the one that makes those arguments. And then Wolfwood's argument about Vash having to choose, he makes that in the OG series. But when you have Roberto there, it's kind of like Roberto is just taking up Wolfwood's time on screen. And I don't give a shit about Roberto. Give me more Wolfwood. Like, I want more Wolfwood, but as long as Roberto's there, he's just going to say the same stuff that Wolfwood would have said. And it's like... And the thing that's frustrating is that logically, because of the way the story is set up, Roberto is the old man character, the wiser, older character, or at least so we think. Vash is older than all of them. But Roberto is supposed to be the mentor old man figure who can say all these things, and it seems natural. Because now we know that Wolfwood is not an old man or an older man. He's a kid that basically has aged up too fast. Some of the things that Wolfwood would normally say in the OG series are based on experience that Wolfwood doesn't actually have. because Wolfwood's like a teenager that's in a 27-year-old's body. So in the OG series, the stuff that Wolfwood would normally say that is now Roberto's lines made sense because Wolfwood had lived on that planet, he had experience. Now, because you've set up this plot element about Wolfwood and Livio being kids turned into adults, you can't exactly do that anymore. So the dialogue that's kind of like very cynical and against the idealism and saying, well, this planet's not like that, you don't understand, you've not been here long enough, now you have to give them to Roberto. But that was a good chunk of Wolfwood's dialogue in the OG series. So now, instead of getting more Wolfwood moments, we have to have Roberto say it, and Wolfwood's just kind of off here on the corner not doing anything. And I'm like... And I do think Roberto was acting kind of out of character. He was acting more like Wolfwood, which is because of that whole thing. So it is frustrating to me because I feel like Roberto is a useless character. They just created him because it's making more sense now why he's here. He has to be here to deliver certain lines because you need a character with experience. And because you've chosen this plot element of Wolfwood, now you can't have him do that. So you need a character to kind of fill in the gaps. And so I understand Roberto's character's point in the story now, but I'm like, I hate it. I'm like, no, I want more Wolfwood, less Roberto. So if Roberto mysteriously has an unfortunate accident and doesn't make it past season 1, I don't know if I'm going to be sad. Don't know if I'm going to be sad. But yeah, I just feel like Roberto got to walk around with Meryl and see all this stuff, and then he gets kidnapped and taken to the facility with Zazie, and meanwhile, Wolfwood's just stuck leaning up against a wall with his giant cross-ass gun. So it's like, what do we do with that? Now, I do think it makes more sense for Roberto to be taken with Meryl because Wolfwood can't go. Knives will instantly out him. Meryl will be like, you've been working with them? What's going on? So I get why the story is doing the things that it's doing. It's smartly handling the changes it has to make. And there's a lot with the lore and the stuff with Knives and Vash that I really, really am fascinated by. But Roberto's whole role in this story, I'm like, I know why you're here now, and I don't like it. I understand your purpose, but I just wish I didn't have to understand your purpose. I wish there could have been another way. But what can we do? So... oh well. But I really love this episode. It's really good. I'm so curious now. The story has altered enough from the source material that I'm like, I don't exactly know what we're going to do with Meryl and with Roberto next episode. I'm kind of excited about that. The thing about it is, we were talking about this in the reaction and in the earlier discussion. In the OG series, Zazie dies. Zazie is shot by Wolfwood. So Zazie gets killed. I don't know if that's going to happen in this series because Roberto taking the shot at Zazie kind of proved that Zazie's not going to be easy to take out. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think Zazzie's going to live, which I'm fine with. I like Zazzie's character a lot. I want them to live. But the whole point that Blue Summers had was Blue Summers wanted to test Vash. Knives said to put Vash through hell, make him suffer for choosing to side with humanity. And that's what Legato did. Legato basically made Vash kill him. Otherwise, his friends were going to die. Now, Legato's character being as nihilistic as he is, do I think that by the end of this season, it might be that Legato makes Vash kill him? Maybe. And maybe that's where the season ends, with Vash being like, what choice do I make? I think that maybe Legato will step in by the time that Vash and Wolfwood get there. Maybe not in episode 10, but in episode 11. And Legato's going to make him kill him. And then episode 12 will be them. I think that Knives is going to get away with the girl plant and the doctor. Legato's going to die. Zazie might get away. But I feel like by the end that Wolfwood and Meryl are going to tell. And maybe Legato kills Roberto. I don't know. And that's what makes Vash realize he has to kill Legato because he's killed Roberto and he's going to hurt Wolfwood and Meryl. And Livio's somewhere in there. He's not completely dead yet that we know of. So I feel like maybe the season is going to end with Vash like getting the pieces picked back up together with Wolfwood and Meryl and deciding they've got to go after Knives. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm very, very curious to see. My dog's like pushing this toy over the bookshelf. I'm very curious to see at this point what ends up happening in the last 3 episodes and how much it's going to follow the OG series, the plot points we do know about, and then what's going to end up happening. So I'm so curious. But I really loved this episode. Rule of 8 be damned. This one was really, really good. Maybe Trigun's a rule of 9. I don't know. In any case, I'm excited to hear your thoughts down below. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with episode 10 of Trigun Stampede. Bye!